So, Breath of the Wild is getting a prequel, Hyrule Warriors is getting a sequel, and I'm getting heart palpitations? That's a pretty unlikely series of 3 events to happen back to back. This is basically the exact intercept of everything I possibly could have wanted out of a Zelda spin-off. And I am very excited. And you know what happens when I get excited? Baseless speculation. A Warriors game is nothing without its roster, and while some have been theorizing that this game in particular will have a more compacted one, this line in the reveal trailer makes me think we still have a lot yet to see.
And while we maintained the distinct gameplay style of the Warriors series, with exciting 1 versus 1,000 battles, and a wide variety of playable characters,
Combine that with the inevitable DLC packs we'll receive down the road, and I think we can look forward to a pretty hefty roster. Of course, this may also not be the case, and we'll have a comparatively small lineup that makes up for it by being much more complex. And while I'd totally be on board with that, this video isn't about that possibility. We're gonna go over 15 plus characters here, whether or not they make sense, how they would play, and generally how likely they are to be in this game. To start us off, let's go over characters that would have appeared during the Age of Calamity 100 years in the past. Or I guess the present in this game's case. I love this little guy. Well, I tend to love robots in general, but I especially love it when creatures that are normally considered enemies or evil are actually heroes. But the big question about Eggbot is whether or not it's actually playable. At first I thought it might be this game's version of Proxy the Fairy, i.e. just an excuse to give Link a voice on the battlefield without having him actually talk. But in recent trailers, this little robot seems to be mute, and generally act as a little helper who aids you during battle. It could very well be an extension of the My Fairy system of the original Hyrule Warriors. But I'm still holding out hope that he becomes directly playable at some point. The idea of actually playing as a Guardian is kinda amazing, even if it is just a little one. Getting the ability to actually fire off those giant lasers would be absolutely fantastic. And I can already see many of the Guardian Scout's moves working as excellent combo finishers, like the Tornado Laser or the Spinning Weapons Charge Attack. Purah and Robbie, the 2 Sheikah researchers who were alive during the Age of Calamity. We've already seen both of them in the game, but will they be playable? I certainly hope so. With Robbie, I could see it pretty easily. Given his role in Breath of the Wild, he could use all the ancient weapons. The bow and arrows, shield, spear, short sword, giant chainsaw. But Purah is a bit trickier. Her 2 main things are 1, she's baby, and 2, she has an immense amount of knowledge about the Sheikah Slate and its runes, which is a gameplay niche unfortunately already taken by Zelda. So I'd imagine if she was actually made playable, it would have to be a pretty original moveset, right? She certainly has the pizzazz for it. Maybe she could attack using those blue flames that power her lab? Or, I don't know, just flashy poses? Other than that, I got something. Nintendo could really go buck wild with these 2, and considering their relative importance to the game overall, I think it's actually pretty likely. The king is a bit odd. He doesn't really fight at all, and all the really interesting things you could pull attacks from come from when he's already dead. I mean, they came up with a moveset for the other Zelda king, you know, the sentient boat. So giving Rhoam here a ghost-based moveset with his lantern on a stick and glider certainly wouldn't be out of the ordinary. But because of this, I'd wager him being playable in the main story is very unlikely. But in other modes, I definitely want to see it happen. Hetsu is a pretty cool guy, right? Plays maracas, expands your inventory, has very impressive facial hair despite not having hair, and he would be the perfect representative of the Koroks in this game. We know he's there 100 years in the past, but will he actually be playable? Yes, I'm like 99% sure. Assuming he's in, he'd certainly attack with the power of music, with the upside being that maracas lend themselves pretty well to hitting people in the face repeatedly. Not only could he use his fellow Koroks in attacks, but he could also use the various Korok tests. Those metal cubes, the floating targets, sprouts. He could also attack enemies with his fat dumps, which are a thing that canonically exist in the Zelda universe. Hyrule Warriors had its fair share of villainous commanders, and fighting them was a big part of the gameplay, so I think it stands to reason that we should expect some of that again here. And so far, it looks like we have 3 characters filling that role. Master Koga, the absolute legend, some Yiga commander we don't know the name of yet, and this mysterious figure. A lot of people are speculating that this is the fortune teller that told the king about the guardians and divine beasts. You know, directly leading into the Calamity. All we know about them for sure, though, is that they have the symbol of the Gerudo on their back and a glowing Calamity eye on their forehead. Given the orb, this is definitely some sort of techromancer working to resurrect Ganon, and I'm assuming will fill the role of Sia from the first game, i.e. the main villain that isn't Ganon himself. One neat little detail is that the orb they're holding is definitely Sheikah-like tech, but it's glowing purple instead of blue. Is this a sort of dark magic version of the usual ancient magical technology? Or is this person from a rival civilization from the same ancient era out for revenge? We could be in for a bucket load of lore here, that's for sure. I think in Age of Calamity, it's pretty likely that we'll get a playable Calamity Ganon in some form, though of course not the final boss itself, or Ganondorf. I'm thinking more along the lines of the Blights. I don't think all 4 of them will be playable, but I do think a more generic Blight that combines elements of the other 4 in a more human size would make for a great enemy commander and an awesome playable character. The zipping around of the Thunder Blight, the cannon of the Wind Blight, the ice blocks of the Water Blight, and the shield of the Fire Blight. Just tearing through enemies as one of these big bad bosses would be a sight to behold. Plus, they just generally have really amazing and creepy designs, and I'd love to see an uncanny human-looking one. And now we get into the characters from the era of Breath of the Wild proper. These guys wouldn't be in the main campaign, obviously, but they could certainly be used if the story continues past the, past at any point, whether that's through a second campaign we haven't seen yet or DLC. Plus, they could just non-canonically be used in whatever equivalent to adventure mode this game has. So what better candidates to talk about in the modern day than the modern equivalents to the champions of old? These are the 4 main members of each race you interact with during your main quest: Prince Sidon, Riju, Yunobo, and Teba. The interesting thing about this group is that 2 of these characters are some of the most popular in the game overall, while with the other 2, just about nobody seems to care about them. Maybe for Teba and Yunobo, this would be a good opportunity to get more popular. Teba is odd to talk about because while I love his design, you spend so little time with him in-game that there isn't really much I can say about the guy. Other than that he is a pretty cute family unit, I guess. He's apparently a great archer, but I'm not sure what could be done to separate him from Rivali in that regard. Obviously, the devs could come up with something, but I'm not sure what they would do outside of flying around and generic archery attacks. Needless to say, this dude really needs to be fleshed out, and this is a golden opportunity to do that. Yunobo, on the other hand, isn't really unpopular because we don't know him. I honestly just don't think his design and personality are very appealing. Like, he's just the generic, stupid, cowardly strongman type, and generally looks like a giant, buff, creepy baby. Though that might just be my terrible opinion. More character development for him here could definitely change my mind. His moveset could revolve around his inherited Daruk's protection, and being shot out of a cannon. Other than that, it'd probably be pretty original. Rigi has the most moveset potential out of the bunch. She could use powerful lightning attacks with the Thunder Helm, and do some slick shield surfing attacks with her seal Patricia. I could see quite a few mechanics with Patricia especially. Ramming enemies, splashing sand everywhere. This is generally a pretty self-explanatory inclusion, really. She's very popular, very unique, has a well-developed character, and I think we all want her in. And speaking of characters everybody wants, it's Prince Sidon, baby! This guy has quite the personality. You just know that his moves are gonna ooze with style. And a lot of teeth glistening. Given that he's never seen wielding a weapon, I'd wager his attacks would be pretty similar to Princess Rudo's from the original game, attacking via swimming and manipulating water. And now for the character that overshadowed Teba in almost every way, oops. The macaw, the myth, the legend, Kass. Yes, I know attacking people with an accordion seems really stupid, especially for the more serious tone of Breath of the Wild, but Hyrule Warriors has gone dumber before, and Kass is just way too popular of a character to not include. I assume he'd attack with giant musical notes, similarly to Marin and Zelda from the previous game, and if he could get all of his kids to help him in battle, that'd be hilarious and adorable. Lana and Sia. So, unlike literally every other character on this list, these two are not canon. Not to the past or the present. If they were to appear in the story in any capacity, it would be an optional what-if scenario or something. But even with all that said, I still think these two are very likely. Age of Calamity may be canon official lore, but it's still a sequel to Hyrule Warriors, made by the same team. And Lana and Sia were not only extremely important characters to the original title, I mean, look at all three of the covers, but it also makes perfect sense for them to show up in Breath of the Wild in an unofficial capacity. Their job is watching the timeline, and they can pop in anywhere they please. It wouldn't be a stretch at all to see these two show up in Breath of the Wild. I also think seeing Sia post-redemption arc would be pretty interesting. Her old moveset was all about being cartoonishly evil and laughing maniacally after every attack. It would be a pretty interesting shift. Speaking of Hyrule Warriors and legacy characters, aside from the typical reincarnations, there is only one character from the series' history that is not only mentioned in Breath of the Wild, but it also makes complete sense for them to physically be there. Fi. Now, this one is unlikely, but we do know Fi is still kicking it in the Master Sword, so it's actually on the table, I think. Honestly, I purely want this from a characterization perspective. Fi only really started getting a personality at the very end of Skyward Sword, and since then she's been stuck in that sword for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years. we could see an older, wiser, more emotional version of the character. Or maybe she's super jaded because of the whole I have no mouth yet I must scream situation she's been in. Stuck in an inanimate object for unknown eons, watching countless Links and Zeldas live and die while society never progresses past a medieval monarchy. Because Ganon's a prick, what are you gonna do? I just think it would be an interesting thing to see. So that's my 2 rubies about who I think should be in Age of Calamity. Given how insanely content-rich and full of fan service the original was, this is currently my most hyped game of the year. Because of the sheer amount of potential this game has, I've probably just barely scratched the surface of what's possible, and I'd really love to see who and what you all want to show up in this game. If you're so inclined, leave a comment and tell me about it. And maybe like and subscribe if you enjoyed it. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to continue to play the original Hyrule Warriors. While recording footage for this video, I got addicted again.